Hello, I am Georgina Rose. I'm a perennialist and polytheist, and welcome back to the Pagan Perspectives podcast. In this podcast, I lend a pagan, esoteric, and metaphysical perspective to the mundane issues that go throughout our lives. Essentially, I take topics that relate to our sort of normal lives and then turn to mythology, esoterica, metaphysics, magic to understand it and deal with it, and offer spiritual solutions to the things we deal with on the regular. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking about a topic that affects pretty much everyone, especially my female listeners, though also my male ones. I think this does sort of reach everyone, and that's beauty standards, body image, that whole sort of can of worms, which is kind of a huge can of worms. Because it's something that is basically pushed at us all the time. It's brought up all the time, especially online, and it really gets to people. So I would like to give a perhaps warning, perhaps encouragement. This episode is going to, it's going to talk about what beauty is from a metaphysical perspective. So there is a lot of metaphysics discussion and sort of myth discussion and archetype discussion. But, I am going to talk a bit about body image issues, how objective or how subjective beauty actually is. Our culture around beauty and some sensitive topics around that. I do in the outline briefly mention like eating disorders, and body dysmorphia. And I'm going to get into things like Ozempic and skinnytok and some of these subjects that are really sort of buzzy in our culture that definitely might bother some people or cause some people to have a sort of negative reaction. So if you are one of those people who sort of struggle with these topics, I know most women, struggle with body image. So this might be kind of sensitive in that regard. I offer you two options. One, you might want to listen to another episode of this podcast, if you think this podcast would not be productive to your journey. But two, if you want to kind of, challenge some of those negative thoughts and sort of see the truth about what beauty actually is, this podcast could actually be quite healing for you, right? Because for me, I have dealt with body image issues in my life. I've mentioned that before. And for me, some of these thoughts I'm going to discuss in this episode and some of these divine truths actually did help me with my body image issues. So I really think that's kind of like a personal discernment thing, and you can always, click out at any point and come back to it, right? You don't need to listen to it all the way through in one go if that would really not be productive to your growth, right? Because look, at the end of the day, my goal is to help people become stronger occultists, stronger mystics, and to reunite with divinity, right? The whole goal of all of this is the great work, and the great work is reuniting with the Godhead. And you always want to do what is best for you to achieve the great work, right? We constantly want to think about the great work and how to use our true will to achieve the great work. So just check in with yourself before you listen. Think about, what's going on with you in this moment. So our culture right now is really going through a shift with our view on this subject. And that's really why I wanted to make this topic, because right now, essentially the vibe has shifted. Honestly, I mean, I almost want to say it's shifted because throughout the 2010s and the early 2020s, the big thing was body positivity, right? That was a real buzz. People who were like body positivity influencers got a ton of views, right? And that's pretty much dead, right? People are done with body positivity, for some good and some bad reasons. I have kind of like a multifaceted sort of opinion on that. And now, we're back to thin is in, right? There's a big trend when I'm recording this called skinnytok. And what prompted me to make this podcast was an article that came out in The Cut, which is basically a publication the New Yorker puts out, sort of exploring this woman, Liv Schmidt, who basically is sort of the ringleader of skinnytok. And what they did is they went into, basically this woman makes a lot of videos about how to lose weight and how to be your skinniest. And she really says like being as thin as possible, as beautiful as possible. And she had this pay to play group chat, and The Cut, basically one of their reporters went into her group chat undercover and took a lot of like screenshots and stuff. And what it showed is that there were teenagers in the group chat and there was a lot of open discussion of anorexic behavior, right? And this woman does promote this under the guise of health. Now, this is not a drama podcast. The drama around Liv Schmidt does not really matter to this conversation. If you're curious about that, feel free to read the Cut article. But what I want to talk about is basically what that represents, right? What does it mean for our culture that we have gone from body positivity, right, to the point where it really did start to become actually very toxic, and I'm going to get into that in a bit, to skinny is amazing. And basically, what is the spiritual answer to this? Because the spiritual meaning of beauty is actually very different from the cultural meaning of beauty. And I think as mystics, we should return to the spiritual and the mythic definition of beauty and reject the ever changing cultural standards, because we're really seeing a cultural whiplash right now, right? It went from literally every body is beautiful. You don't need to change anything about yourself, even if you are literally, very sick because of certain lifestyle choices, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Society's the problem too. Your body is horrible. It's your fault that you're not perfect. You need to be as thin as you can humanly possibly be, right? You need to hurt yourself to achieve that goal, right? That's a whiplash. That is literally like swinging from one extreme to the other extreme. And this has basically been going on back and forth for decades, right? In the early 2000s, it was very extreme thinness. Then it went to literally, body positivity that got very extreme as well. And I want to sort of help people figure out what the truth is, because the truth is in the middle. And until we recognize this, there's going to continue to be this pendulum swing effect where we're going from one unhealthy culture to another unhealthy culture, back and forth and back and forth. And I want to start with discussing body positivity. So, body positivity was a movement in which people sort of learned to accept and love their bodies. On the surface, I actually really like this idea. I think that insecurity is really detrimental to spiritual growth. I think that, we should all strive to accept ourselves. But where body positivity went wrong is that it started to basically say that changing yourself is bad because you're already perfect. And the truth is, sometimes we do need to change ourselves, right? Sometimes we are in a position where change is necessary, right? If someone is like struggling with obesity, right? I think that if you are obese, you should not hate yourself, right? I think that's really messed up. I don't support messaging like hating yourself is never going to cause positive growth, right? It's going to cause you to self-sabotage. It's going to cause you to make your situation worse. So I think if you're in that situation, you should accept where you are presently at and then change yourself for health reasons, right? Not for reasons that are based in self-hatred or contempt, right? Reasons that are about like making yourself better, right? And when I've known people who struggle with obesity, because it is a medical condition, right? Um, when they do it for health, they tend to actually feel better and not, ruminate in self hatred, right? And then at the end, they actually reach a really healthy, good goal, right? It ends well. It ends with them no longer being obese and actually healing themselves from the inside out and creating a healthier life, right? I think that's really the approach. And I think telling people like, it's healthy to be in a very, bad physical situation is very counterproductive. I think it's damaging rhetoric. And there was a body positivity influencer who actually died. I remember that conversation, and that was a real shock moment for people. And I think we should understand that, health is really important. But at the same time, the message within body positivity that you shouldn't hate yourself, that's a good message. Nobody should hate themselves, because when we think about self-hatred, I think we need to see it as the inverse of narcissism, right? Because when we're looking at narcissism is really based around the belief that you are individually completely separate, completely unique, right? If you love yourself to such an extent that you're a narcissist, right? And you are the best person ever lived, like you're very grandiose, that's not rooted in reality. That's a delusion, right? And we recognize that. But if someone goes the other way, where they think they are individually the worst person who's ever existed, right? Everyone hates them. There's nothing redeeming about them. They're horrible, right? Is that not still kind of a narcissism? Because it is saying that you are special, you are unique in a way that no one else is, right? You are independently the worst human who's ever existed. I think we need to see that as a foil to narcissism. In truth, every single person has good things and bad things about them. Nobody is uniquely perfect. Nobody's uniquely terrible. And I think, moving away from both of these extremes is really important. Because the thing is, if you see yourself as perfect, that's typically rooted in some sort of lack, right? And if you see yourself as horrible, it's rooted in some sort of belief of specialness, right? The thing is, we are all special in that we all have a spark of divinity in us, but there is no person who has less or more of a spark of divinity in them, right? We all are divine in our own right, but at the same time, we're not gods. And I think understanding that we're special and part of something cosmic, while also not, seeing ourselves as wholly unique, is very important, because we understand metaphysically there is no separation, right? So at the end of the day, none of us are horrible, none of us are amazing. We're all kind of mixed, right? There's good and bad within all things, right? Dualism is false, right? There's good and bad in all. The yin and the yang exist in all of us. So no, you're not worse than everyone else. You're not uglier than everyone else, but you're also not like entirely perfect. And body positivity, if you think about it, is really a message that everyone is perfect. And that doesn't really make sense. Everyone has flaws, right? And I think we need to accept our flaws and understand that they're there without losing our minds about it. So body positivity, it also, I think, kind of sets people up for failure, right? Because if you sort of set the standard at loving everything about yourself, I think in a sense that's actually kind of unrealistic, because we all have things we don't love about ourselves, right? We all have a shadow, right? We all have, I'm an astrologer, right? I look at people's charts all day. I give people readings, and there are good things and bad things in every person's chart I've ever looked at. I've never seen anyone who had a perfectly good chart or perfectly bad chart. Everyone has something they need to remediate, right? And so if you define yourself as perfect and you're like, I'm perfect as I am, you are setting yourself for failure, because the moment you see something within yourself or you do something that is not perfect, basically you're going to have an ego fracture, right? You're going to have a ego collapse. And when we're talking about the ego, we're talking about our self. So in a sense, yes, the ego always exists. You cannot kill the ego without death. But we get these sort of like false egos within our mind, where it's like how we perceive ourselves. And I want to call it the false ego. When people talk about ego death, they're often talking about false ego fractures. And when you see yourself as like, I am perfect as I am, you're basically setting yourself up for a involuntary ego fracture, right? You're setting yourself up for failure. You're not setting yourself up with a good sort of starting ground. There was a concept that went around, it never got a lot of attention, because it's not, that exciting, called body neutrality. And basically, it's where you kind of see your body as a thing that is a sort of machine, where you're like, okay, my legs are there to help me run, my skin is there to feel the sunshine, right? It's basically like seeing yourself kind of in a utilitarian way. And I like this more, actually. I think for people who struggle with body image, this is probably the stance that you might want to take early on in your healing journey. Because of course beauty is good, and I'm going to get into that. But if you are in a place where you are really struggling, I think the first thing you need to do is actually move towards body neutrality and seeing your body as more utilitarian, because your perception of beauty is really already kind of skewed. And I'm going to get into how our perception of beauty is skewed. So I think for your sort of factory reset towards, developing a good relationship with beauty in the self, you need to just see your body as a thing that works. Because if you do that, you're inherently going to take care of yourself, because you have to sort of take care of the car you are living in, right? You wouldn't, starve it. You wouldn't overfeed it, right? You would give it the right amount of gas. If you put too much gas in a car, your car might catch on fire at the gas pump. If you put too little, your car is going to break down on the highway. So I think that type of stance is really good when people are early on in this type of journey. I like this. This never went viral because it's not that exciting. It's not that cool, right? And it doesn't feel as good as like immediately validating everything about yourself. But I don't think it sets you up for failure, because your body will always have a utilitarian function of getting you throughout the world. Now, the new trend is the other extreme, right? People saw that body positivity was hurting people, and they're like, okay, well, this is delusion, this is horrible. And so they went the other extreme, which I see how this started to happen. But because nobody on the internet can be normal and nuanced and reasonable, it went immediately back to like early 2000s diet culture, body negativity. It's body negativity, right? And there's this whole community called skinnytok, where people are like giving tips on you like how to be as perfect as possible. And you're also seeing in the skincare world a big boom. Like there's a real anti-aging obsession going on right now. There was a big news story a couple months back, probably like a year ago back now. I'm not really good at being topical and on time. Where basically Sephora's were getting inundated with children as young as 7 trying to get anti-aging skincare because they're so scared of aging. And there were actually reports of young girls getting chemical burns from using retinols and extreme exfoliants at ages that their skin was simply not ready to handle that. So right now it's like people have put our current version of beauty up like an idol, right? Like it's not reasonable, because the thing is, when you take beauty to this extreme that it starts becoming, I mean, I'm just going to call it vanity, right? You actually end up harming yourself and actually getting further away from the divine conception of beauty, right? Like if you get really into skinny talk and you watch these videos about how you're only supposed to have like 3 bites of every dish you like and that's it, like, you're going to hurt yourself, right? People who are, severely underweight are also not actually, in a divine state of beauty, right? They are unhealthy, right? That is unhealthy. If you are so fixated on skincare that you have to use 90 serums before you go to sleep. There are these videos called Morning Shed where people put mouth tape over their mouth, which by the way can cause you to asphyxiate in your sleep, so bad idea. And then they use like anti-wrinkle straws, and they do all sorts of crazy things. There's also a whole trend of sun avoidance, where basically you don't go outside between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., right? And you go to bed with all this stuff on your face. You It's really extreme, right? You avoid the sun entirely because, of course, the sun can cause aging, right? The sun can also give us cancer. The sun, too much sun is bad for you. But at the same time, we need sun to be happy, right? Vitamin D inhibits our joy. And metaphysically, the sun is the center of all life and vitality, right? We need solar energy in our lives. And interestingly, when people do purification from miasma, and miasma does relate to a lot of things like depression and whatnot, they actually invoke the sun, right? The sun is a healer. And that's a real moment where metaphysics gets proven by science when we understand, solar work can cure miasma on a spiritual level, but on a physical level, vitamin D can actually diminish depression symptoms in people, right? That's one of those where science later in the future proved an ancient metaphysical idea, right? Obviously, like I'm not saying don't wear sunscreen, to be clear. I think sunscreen is important because it prevents cancer. And I think there's something messed up that we're more focused on sunscreen to prevent wrinkling than to prevent cancer, when cancer is definitely like a lot worse than having a few wrinkles on your forehead. But yeah, we need the sun. You need to live your life. With the skincare stuff, I see it as people like rejecting life in a sense, right? Because if you're, there was a really interesting article I read called "Is Anyone Having Sex After Their 10-Step Skincare Routine?" And I know that sounds kind of like in your face, but think about it. If you're going to sleep with mouth tape and eye mask and, a V strap to make your jawline sharper when you're sleeping, like, are you having sex? Are you making love with the jawline strap on? Like, does that stay on during sex? Because like people, they have sex before they go to bed and they wake up. And like if you're, in a long-term committed relationship, like that's kind of part of your life. I've discussed extensively how sex is the unification of opposites, is transcendent. Eros can get us to agape, right? These things are important. And like, if we don't have sex at any point, the species will die off, which would be a little bit unpleasant. We maybe don't want to all die off. But yeah, I mean, how can you even like have relationships if you're sleeping like that? Also, I don't know how a person can fall asleep with all that stuff on their face. I think I would rip it off after 10 minutes, but I mean, it's a good point. And with sun avoidance, right? Like going out in the sun is so fun, right? Going on hikes, honoring nature. As pagans, we understand we honor nature, we honor the seasons, right? The seasonal calendar of the year is life, death, rebirth epitomized, right? It is the divine cycle. That's the reason why we have Sabbaths on, midsummer and the winter solstice and all these dates, because we know the sun moving and turning represents the divine move and turn throughout our lives. And if we're avoiding that between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. every single day, we're sort of avoiding the divine, right? It becomes a rejection of life. It becomes really kind of freaky. And when we think about, skinnytok and extreme caloric restriction, right? I think people should eat healthy, okay? I have a radical opinion on the internet of you should eat a healthy, balanced diet in a way that keeps you at a healthy body weight, right? Between, a regular BMI, right? Not underweight, not overweight. I think that's pretty much the ideal. I have this crazy position that being healthy is the ideal way to live. I know, blasphemy, burn me at the stake, honestly, for that one. It's not like, living as long as you can and having, good experiences is important. No, you got to be perfect for TikTok, right? So I'm wrong. Of course, cancel me in the comments below if you think I'm delusional. But yeah, I think people should be healthy. And, if you severely undereat for a long period of time, I mean, you risk death, infertility, osteoporosis. Like it's really bad stuff. It actually destroys you. And when you are kind of having these things where it is starting to become overkill, you are in a sense destroying your beauty, right? You're destroying yourself. You're destroying your body. And we understand on a metaphysical level, mind, body, spirit, it's a triangle, right? They're completely related. When your body is suffering, so is your mind, your intellectual capacities. And actually, we know people with highly restrictive eating habits actually do have cognitive decline. They literally, like their brain cells die, their IQ lowers. And we understand that it affects our spiritual health. If you are destroying your physical body, you are destroying your spiritual body. That goes in both directions, right? That goes in all directions. If you are doing anything that hurts yourself physically, you are hurting yourself spiritually, right? And we need to consider all these three things as being linked. And what happens is when people get into these crazy regimens is they become hyper fixated on it, and it destroys their mental health. I mean, I actually, this is a strange story from my life I didn't know I would ever share, but I briefly worked at a spray tanning salon, okay? Look, guys, did it for the check. I was young and I needed some work experience. So I was a spray tan technician, which is really funny since I'm actually quite pale, and I don't like the look of spray tans. I think they look really artificial. But I worked at a tanning salon for like a month. And it was not good. Not my best experience, but it was really interesting because when I had girls come into my booth. So when you're a spray tanner, right, like the people are naked. So I held like a spray tanning gun and the girls got naked and I spray tanned their naked bodies. And I saw a lot of naked people, like all day I saw naked people. And it was actually kind of interesting because I saw what people actually looked like in real life. Cause when someone's like in front of you and like the horrible lighting that's, really bright. So I can see how what I'm doing. I mean, you get an interesting perspective on how the average person looks because I do think social media skews how people look because most images on social media are filtered, edited, right? You don't really see how real humans look if you're terminally online. So I saw a lot of people in real life. But what I also found the most sad, I guess, was women would come into my booth all the time and I would always like small chat with them because like when you're looking at a naked person, it's kind of awkward if you don't like talk to them. Like it's just kind of weird. So I would ask them like, okay, what are you getting this spray tan for? It felt like an easy small talk question. And so often girls would come into my booth and they would say, I hate my pale skin. I feel ugly. No guy is ever going to want me, right? Like I'm going on a date with my boyfriend. I don't want him to like, take my clothes off and see me looking disgusting and pale. And I always struggled to respond to these girls because I would be looking at them, naked and pale in front of me. And I would be like, there's nothing really wrong with you, right? Like you look good. And they would, basically get a dysmorphia with it where they would never think they were tan enough, right? These girls would keep getting darker and darker spray tans to the point where they looked like really bad. Because they were that insecure about something that you really can't do anything about, your skin tone. Like if you're pale, like you're pale. I mean, there's not much that can be done there. I mean, I guess I'm glad they were getting like spray tans instead of going in tanning booths and like maximizing their cancer potential. But yeah, it made me kind of sad, and then that's one of the many reasons why I'm not. I did that so briefly. It was just not a good fit for me. But yeah, it was very sad, and I think this is where I get into dysmorphia, and where I want to talk about body dysmorphia because we get this thing with ourselves called ego attachments, right? Where we have these like false egos that we believe are true, false perceptions of ourselves. And on a spiritual level, these things are toxic and disruptive. They need to be destroyed. These false egos block us from our true self, right? I talk a lot about the true will and how discovering your true will is vital in order to achieve the great work, in order to have, your fullest potential be reached, right? Your true will is something that is intrinsic to you, right? You have had your true will within you since before you were born, right? Your true will is your connection to the divine, right? Your true will, you can call it so many different things, your higher purpose, your pure will, whatever you want to call it. You can even use the new age term soul contract if you would like, right? This is your fate. And you need to choose to follow that path, right? You need to do that. And to discover your true will, you need to get rid of these false perceptions, right? We go down these false paths all the time because we as humans are easily capable of delusion, right? We delude ourselves. The worst person you can lie to is yourself, and most people do lie to themselves. And the lies we tell ourselves are completely influenced by culture. If our culture did not say pale skin was ugly, I don't think I would have had to see for hours at a day women in front of me on the brink of crying, talking about how much they hated their skin tone, right? And that was a really eye-opening experience. And so we need to destroy these false perceptions. And our world wants to make us sick. I think that's a hard thing to admit, but I think it's true. Our culture wants us sick. Our norms within our society are unhealthy, okay? If you think about the average person, right? The average person, right? They live an unhealthy lifestyle, they have poor mental health, and they do a lot of things to make their health worse on the regular, right? I think alcohol use is normalized to a really dangerous extent, right? I don't think, having a drink or two is bad, but I think, there's so many people who are just casual alcoholics, right? Once again, high obesity rates are a problem, and obesity should be seen as, a medical problem, not shamed or ridiculed, but it shouldn't be normalized, if you get what I'm saying. We live in an unhealthy world in so many ways, and there's so many unhealthy things we're taught, and what we are lied to about beauty is one of those unhealthy things, right? We're told to hurt ourselves to be perfect, right? We're given this false idea of perfection that's not based in mythic truth. And I'm going to get into like traditional esoteric ideas of beauty in a bit. And we need to break out of these things. We need to recognize the norm is not my true will. The norm is not healthy. The norm of our society is not anyone's true will. You are not meant to live a life that makes you feel miserable and be miserable all the time. You simply are not. And you have the power within you, vested in that will in order to make change. Magic itself is using the will to enact change. By discovering your true will and by rejecting these ego attachments, you can change things, right? You have that power. We're also told we have much less power over ourselves and our lives than we actually do. We are way more autonomous and higher agency than people understand that we are. So throw it away. Throw it in the trash can. Do not invest your entire self worth in ever changing beauty standards because the thing is, beauty does not change. Beauty is unchanging, it is perennial, right? These beauty standards, like whether you're supposed to look like Kate Moss or Sydney Sweeney or whatever, of course, those are two objectively beautiful women, but they look completely different, right? There's no way that beauty itself has changed that much in like 20 years, right? That doesn't make any sense. So we need to consider what beauty really is. So throw internet beauty standards away, right? You are not supposed to look like you look under 15 social media filters, right? Everything you look at is filtered, everything you look at is photoshopped. Assume that, okay? Don't look at any image on the internet and think anything else of it. Assume it is Photoshop, fake, right? Base what normal people look like based on the normal people you see in your town, right? That's the real like normies, okay? Like you see people getting so delusional with it. Like I saw someone saying Sydney Sweeney is mid. Like what? Sydney Sweeney is incredibly gorgeous. She's like incredible. So throw it all away, okay? Don't care about changing beauty standards, right? Don't go, well, okay, slim thick was cool 5 years ago, but now I'm supposed to be a rail, so I guess I have to change my body all the time, right? Like the Kardashians, who are so obnoxious, they went from like BBLs to like being like borderline underweight in like a year. Like, there's no point in keeping up with that, right? That's just gonna drive you crazy, right? It's just gonna make you feel nuts. And when you are distracted by keeping up with the Joneses, you're not focused on your spiritual growth. You're not focused on what really matters because this is not the most important thing, okay? Looking hot on TikTok is not the most important thing. It is not what you should define your life by. You should define your life by higher things: virtue, true will, the gods. Those are the things that matter, right? This shit does not matter. Rip it out of your head. And it's typically, rooted deep in our psyche because we've been brainwashed from a young age to believe this stuff. Throw it away. Beauty is real. So let's talk about what beauty actually is. So beauty is not any of the things our culture says beauty is. Ignore it. But beauty's real, right? Beauty is objective, which sounds crazy me saying that after saying what I just said, but hear me out, hear me out, hear me out. Okay, so in our culture, beauty is seen as subjective or changing, right? And that's actually where bad beauty standards come from, right? Because it comes on this idea that beauty shifts, right? What was beautiful 100 years ago is not beautiful now, and so on, right? That implies subjectivity, right? And of course, beauty is somewhat subjective, right? People like different things, people have different aesthetics. There's a range of what is beautiful, right? There's not one single beautiful thing, right? We all look different, right? And we should embrace our differences. I do not think we should all congeal onto one singular mold. Like there's this discussion of this thing called Instagram face. Instagram face is basically how like so many women have gotten a lot of the same cosmetic procedures done that they all look the same. Like if you watch a period drama, you'll see nobody looks like they were actually from that period. That's Instagram face, right? I'm not advocating for metaphysical Instagram face, okay? We need to understand what we look like and embrace our differences while understanding beauty is real. So, where does beauty come from? So, beauty is a divine concept. So, within Platonism, which is like a philosophy related to polytheism, this idea of forms or things that objectively exist. And these forms come from the divine source, the divine itself. So, these forms are things like virtue, truth, and one of them is beauty. And we need to see these forms as interrelated. So, beauty and truth link, and truth and the gods link. So, by doing things that bring us closer to the gods, we become more beautiful, and beauty is downstream of the gods. So, we need to first understand that inherently implies beauty and health are linked. So, what brings us closer to the gods? As a question. So, when we're looking at getting closer to the gods as a process, as a question, as a conversation, how do you do that? So, first, you find your true will, then you purify yourself in miasma, and then you do mystic devotional work. Okay, those are kind of the things that bring us closer to the gods. And one of those things is virtue, or like, doing good things, doing mysticism and, divorcing ourselves from the ego. But what on earth does that mean for how do we become beautiful? These themes seem so unrelated. And I think we need to understand what is What is beauty in the eyes of the gods? So where you can get that is actually look at artwork depicting the gods and the goddesses, right? Because this is for men and women. Men have just as many crazy ideas about beauty, right? Men think they need to like have 0.23 like no, almost no body fat, right? And they need to be like bodybuilders, which you can't do without taking steroids, which are bad for you. So for men, this applies too, right? Men, you are included in this conversation. Look at art of gods. Look at them. Like actually spend some time and look at them across cultures, right? See the differences because you will see some differences, but you'll see a lot of core similarities, right? You'll see a lot of things that sort of pop up again and again. For me, what I notice is you see a natural kind of face, right? One that has not had like plastic surgery on it. And you see a healthy body weight, right? You don't see extreme overweightness. You don't see underweightness, right? You see like actually a very healthy, sustainable body type, right? A body type that allows you to do rituals, do yoga, have fertility, right? Reach your goals, reach physical peaks, right? Healthy body weight, right? That's the first thing. And you see generally health. Clear skin. Where does clear skin come from? Not putting 9 million products on your face. It comes from health, right? Skincare, these products are never going to do as much as simply being healthy, right? I advocate for health, not extremes, right? Live your life, enjoy the fullness of life. That's why I went so hard against these extreme ideals. That's crazy. You don't need to cut out every food group, none of that. Throw that in the trash too, right? Just simply live the life we are meant to live. Live the life that our ancestors lived in terms of food and exercise, right? Have fun. Live a life of fun, right? Don't be ruled by these things. You don't want to be in like overthinking jail where you're thinking constantly about this stuff. You want to simply live, right? The gods lived. We remember them by their myths, right? And even gods that represent beauty, right? Apollo and Venus. Apollo is very much like male beauty, Venus, female beauty, right? They lived, right? Well, not lived in the same way, but you get what I'm saying, right? Their acolytes lived. They didn't go insane. So strive for health, okay? And you really should spend some time studying these images because they are not the images you see on social media. They're really not. It doesn't look like they shot 900 milligrams of steroids up their asshole, and it doesn't look like they haven't had a meal in 10 days, right? Neither of those are beautiful, and they also aren't denying self care. Because, if you don't take care of yourself, right? If you don't, live a somewhat healthy lifestyle, you're going to suffer, right? And it doesn't promote that either. It's balanced, it's reasonable, it's practical, right? That is really what beauty is. Beauty is what brings you up, right? And anything that hurts you in any way is not bringing you up. What brings you up is the beautiful, right? The beautiful is the good. And so, really, your beauty should be something that lifts you upwards and makes your life better. And I want to explore how, there's kind of different archetypes. And archetypes are really valuable because, there's not one singular, like I mentioned Venus, but there are other, basically, gods and spirits that are considered beautiful too. And so by taking time to look at different archetypes, you can learn a lot about different ways beauty can appear because once again, there's not one beautiful thing. You don't need to look exactly like a painting of Venus to be beautiful. That's crazy. Look at Artemis, right? Artemis is a bit more kind of boyish visually, but still beautiful. Look at Hera, right? Hera's a bit more like kind of softer and visual, right? But you see those both represent beauty, right? Hera, Venus, Artemis, Freya, right? You see variants coming up. If you look at goddesses from other cultures like Kali, right, you see even more variants. Once again, another way beauty can sort of appear. And once again, exploring divine feminine and divine masculine archetypes and understanding what archetype you connect to most can really help you discover what your sort of ideal should be. Because your ideal should always be something you can reach, right? Your ideal shouldn't be something insane. It shouldn't be something that hurts you, right? Never do anything that hurts you. Only do things that make you better and make you stronger and make you happier. Because if what you're doing to make yourself beautiful doesn't make you happy and makes you sad, you're doing something wrong, right? The path of following the gods is actually the path of least resistance, right? When you're following your true will, when you're living like a virtuous lifestyle, right? You're not suffering as much, right? That suffering is way diminished because you're doing your higher purpose and you understand that higher purpose, right? A lot of what makes people suffer is not understanding that higher purpose. And if you're simply following beauty to keep up with the Joneses, you might accidentally turn yourself kind of uglier, right? Because we can see that. Like you can see when someone is striving for beauty so hard that they actually destroy how they look. And then that's always a tragic thing to see. And I don't think it's worth shaming people, right? I think people really want to like shame and crap on people they don't find beautiful, and I think that's wrong, because where that comes from is resentment in some way. Either you see something in common with that person, something that you hate about yourself, so you hate on them, or you like have some weird, it comes from complexes, right? When you're in a good spiritual place, you're not cruel, you're not harming others, you're not necessarily all love and light and kumbaya, you're not going to like everyone, but you're not like going on Twitter and posting 9 million page rants about how horrible someone looks. And I want to talk about one other thing that holds people back from divine beauty, and that's envy. So envy is a spiritual disease of the heart, right? It is. Envy is something that corrodes you from the inside out, right? Envy was actually feared so much in the ancient world that they made these amulets called the evil eye or the nazar, and they're those blue little evil eyes to hang up to avoid envy, right? Envy is basically when someone basically wants to be you to the point where they destroy you. And actually in the Islamic world, when you compliment someone, you're supposed to say mashallah afterwards to basically prevent you from accidentally cursing them with envy, right? We struggle with envy a lot, and you will not achieve divine beauty when you are in a state of envy, right? And our beauty culture wants you to envy people. In fact, that's how it makes money. Because remember, the beauty industry is like a multi-billion-dollar industry. They want you to be envying people so that you give them money, right? And I also want to clarify, you do not want to envy the gods. You don't want to envy paintings of Venus. You want to see that as like something you can work towards because it's not, unrealistic, right? But not envy, right? Pull that out. Do not, look at 9 million TikTok edits of Snejana Onopka and think about how much more beautiful you'd be if you had her collarbones, right? That's envy. That's not going to help you, and that's not going to help her. Because when you envy someone, you are, in a sense, sending malefic energy their way. And why are you sending malefic energy their way? Because envy is corrosive. Envy rips at your heart and fills you with miasma and rot and darkness that then gets sent in other directions. So if you struggle with envy, you need to pull that out and you need to do purification work, okay? You need to identify that envy, understand you are struggling with envy, and then seek out catharsis. That's purification, and then release that so that you will be happier and so that you're not sending negative energy out into the world that causes harm, okay? Erase envy from your soul. And I think we've all envied, okay? I think it's normal at some point in our lives to envy. It's a natural human experience. So that's why we need to be consciously aware of it. And that's why contemplation is so important to get spiritual growth, right? There's a reason why we say know thyself, right? One of the most important things you can do in the spiritual world is know thyself. Why? Because it is really important to understand yourself so you can understand your true will. And by understanding who you are, you then get closer and closer to your goals. So pull that envy out of your heart, right? Purify it away. And I also want to get into vanity. Vanity is really something that goes hand in hand with this whole conversation. Vanity is really what people are doing when they prioritize their beauty over their health. Because a lot of people, they actively put their beauty above their health, right? Like they are like, yeah, I'm destroying your health, but I don't care. At least I'm going to be hot, right? That's vanity. And that is going to spiritually corrode you too. And that's actually going to block you from reaching your spiritual goals. It's going to hold you back from your spiritual goals. So you need to pull that out of your heart too. Once again, you need to do purification work. And after you've done purification work for these two spiritual diseases of the heart, you need to get closer to the gods. Specifically, I would recommend working with a sun god because the sun relates to virtue and that can kind of like put you back on the right path and moving in the right direction. If you really feel you're struggling with, a confusion about your ego or dysmorphia, right? Let's say you have body dysmorphia. Doing things like tarot to help you understand what's real and what's not can be a really good place to start. But after that, I would really recommend contacting your holy guardian angel. Your holy guardian angel is a sort of guiding spirit that's linked to you. And through doing purification work and then praying to that holy guardian angel, you can establish knowledge and conversation with them, and then they can guide you on what to do next, right? Really seek out guiding spirits that you can sort of, ground yourself and touch base. Because a lot of body dysmorphia is based in delusion and a belief that your flaws are basically not what they actually are. And so by developing that perspective through conversation with a holy guardian angel, you can really heal that. Now, the next thing you could do is Venus remediation. So if you actually do want to become more beautiful and you want to move towards an objective standard of beauty, the divine standard of beauty, you really should contact Venus. You can do this in a number of ways. I would recommend the Orphic hymn to Venus. And by developing a devotion or relationship with Venus, you will become more beautiful because every spirit you sort of interact with gets closer to you and sort of brings you up towards them. Their energy sort of seeps into their life and then filters into your soul. So check out Venus. And if you are, say a Nordic pagan, you might really appreciate a devotion relationship with Freya. And for men, a spirit like Apollo or a solar spirit could really help you through this conversation. I've been talking a lot about the sun, but the sun relates a lot to this conversation, right? The sun and Venus are kind of the two planetary energies that relate to beauty, so really pay attention to the sun and to Venus. I mean, also, one thing that could be valuable is looking at your natal chart or your birth chart. Within your birth chart, there are a lot of keys to your divine balance. And by looking at your Venus sign and then looking at the archetype associated with your Venus sign, you can see the metaphysical archetype of beauty that will sort of benefit you the most. Because once again, I mentioned beauty is archetypal. There's not one singular image of beauty. And so by understanding, okay, well, what sign is Venus in my chart, you can see what archetype of beauty would suit you best. There's a reason why there's a big trend on TikTok where people dress like their Venus sign. That's very helpful and can help you understand basically what would, suit you the best, because there is still some variance, right? There's natural variance, right? There's a reason why health is seen as kind of a range. So look into that and you can sort of understand how you can be the most beautiful. There's a type of spell work that I really would actually recommend avoiding. They're called glamour spells. So glamour spells are very popular in witchcraft communities, and basically they're illusion spells that allow people to see you better. So basically what happens is you do a glamour and then people falsely perceive you as more beautiful. I recommend avoiding these spells because they are things that create illusions and delusions. They are things that block you from truth, and thus they can actually hurt you on your long-term spiritual journey. Yes, a glamour will make you more beautiful, but it is kind of the type of working that could actually have a negative effect on you long term. So I would avoid these personally. I would stay away from them. Aleister Crowley actually wrote a criticism of witchcraft, and his criticism really only applied to this type of magic. That's why, like, despite being a Thelemite, I don't have a problem with witchcraft, because Aleister Crowley's criticism of witchcraft was written in the Blue Book, Liber ABA, specifically within um, Magic and Theory and Practice. And his criticism is that witchcraft is bad because witchcraft is simply creating illusions within the material realm that doesn't actually make a deeper spiritual change. That's true for about 2% of witchcraft, not all of witchcraft. And the 2% of witchcraft that it is true for is literally like this type of magic, right? When you're doing a glamour spell, you're not actually becoming more beautiful. You're just seeming more beautiful to people who like don't know otherwise. It's literally like a fake type of magic. It's not one that makes a deeper change. And I think the magic that is the most beneficial to people is the type of magic that makes a deep internal change and a more profound change on the psyche that actually changes the core of who you are so that you can do better. So I really recommend avoiding these type of spells. I think that they can really hold people back. So once again, they do work, but it's maybe not the right path, because what I want people to do is heal their relationship with beauty and find the real beauty of the gods instead of idolizing and holding up fake beauty that holds them back from their actual goals within their true spiritual journey. Um, that's kind of all I want to say. Oh, there was one last thing I want to discuss. Is what I would call Ozempic. Ozempic. Yes, this was the last point. I completely forgot to bring this up the entire podcast. So Ozempic is really popular in our culture right now. There's a big craze of people going on Ozempic. My thoughts on Ozempic are, if you need it for health reasons, go for it. If you do not need it for health reasons, don't go for it. I have a friend who is a nurse in the emergency room in the town I'm in, and she has had people come into the emergency room who have had Ozempic complications and were in a lot of pain. So, that's one of those where you really need to do a pro and con with yourself and understand, like, is this something that's going to net benefit me or net hurt me? And if you are, someone who, like, say, has PCOS or insulin resistance and you need to lose weight for your health, I think there's no shame in using Ozempic to get there. But if you're like 10 pounds overweight, like, maybe don't use Ozempic. I think it's really alarming that celebrities who are at a normal healthy weight are using Ozempic to get to an unhealthy weight. Like Ariana Grande, people claim she used Ozempic. I don't know if that's true, but if she did, she would be a good example of like where that can get toxic, because once again, like, these things can become addictive, and when they become addictions, they're not actually inspiring you to grow spiritually. And at the end of the day, you want what will inspire you to grow spiritually. So yeah, be wary about that. But if it's right for you, that's okay. I know a lot of people kind of like get on their moral high ground and like shame people for using Ozempic, or like, you're lesser because you didn't have discipline or something. Look, if they're doing something good for them, I don't really care the method that they do it. I think Ozempic shaming is just kind of cruel. I don't know. If someone really needs a drug to heal their health, especially if they're diabetic, because I know Ozempic was originally a diabetes drug, just let them use it, like, if it's benefiting that person. But the thing is, once again, you want to do a risk evaluation before you do something like that so that you don't, hurt yourself further. So that's all I have to say on beauty. It just started thunderstorming. Oh my God, I wonder if you guys can hear that on the recording. I like that. It's like a dramatic ending to my ramblings. Heal yourself, right? Take care of yourself, and develop a healthy relationship with yourself and you'll grow spiritually. Don't idolize beauty in a way that hurts you, but at the same time, don't hurt yourself to become perfect. Perfection is often the enemy of the good. I don't remember who said that, but I've heard that before and I kind of like that. I should probably look up who said that. Perfection is the enemy. Oh, it's perfection is the enemy of progress, is the quote. It's Winston Churchill. Whatever. I've heard perfection is the enemy of the good. I think that's a better version of that quote. I like it. So yeah, think about the good, not the perfect, and don't destroy yourself at any point in time. Love yourself in a positive, productive way, not in a narcissistic way, and follow the right path, the path towards the gods. So if you like this podcast, I'm supported on Patreon. You get bonus episodes every Neo-Pagan Sabbath. That's 8 times a year, early access to all these episodes and pre-shows, which are little mini episodes I create just for patrons. I'm a professional astrologer and tarot reader. My booking information will be in the description. I host the YouTube channel Dot Darling, where I make YouTube videos. And if you're listening on that channel, please leave a like and subscribe. And maybe check out my videos too. They're cool. If you're listening on podcasting platforms, please leave a review unless it's a negative review, in which case be silent. It's kind of funny when I say that. Is it wrong I laughed at my own joke there? You guys can comment hate about that if you think that's cringe. And find me under Dot Darling on every platform. I'm also on Substack. I do 2 articles a month. I'm on Instagram, Twitter /X /whatever we're calling that now, Threads, TikTok, TikTok. Yeah, I'm really everywhere. Every platform that matters is my kind of list that I do. I'm not on like Lemon8 or something like really random. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Have an amazing day, night, afternoon, mid-evening, mid-morning, whatever time it is, wherever you are. And take care. This has been Pagan Perspectives. Bye!